You're watching The Word on Cars. My name's Nish, and this Jimny is a little G-Wagon wannabe, but with a big heart. So, a quick history lesson. The Suzuki Jimny has actually been around since 1970 and was an unexpected hit. It filled a gap in the market that no one had considered. While the likes of Toyota Land Cruisers and Mercedes-Benz G-Wagons are very capable, they're also very expensive. So, Suzuki built a small, cheap, yet capable four-wheel drive on a ladder frame that could rumble in the jungle, literally, with the big boys. The fourth generation of the Jimny, released in 2018, has stuck to this ethos. The Jimny is available in a few trim levels, starting with the three-door Jimny Lite. As the name suggests, it's light on standard equipment and only available with a manual box, while the rest of the lineup can be had with an auto. Then there's this, the three-door GLX, which is really the top spec model of the three-door body style. And lastly, we have the five-door XL, which is as loaded as a Jimny gets. All three models get the same 1.5 litre four-cylinder with a whopping 75 kilowatts of power and 130 newton meters of torque. Price-wise, the GLX with the auto would have set you back a shade over 35,000 Australian dollars, but good luck finding one these days for those prices. Instead, the popularity of the Jimny and the fact that Suzuki can't keep up with demand has shot prices up to over 45 grand. And speaking of prices, this mint condition 2022 GLX is for sale at Blinker with over $2,600 of options. So if you're looking for one of these things, head down to Blinker or check out the listing using the link in the description. Now, the styling of the Jimny is awesome. It's got this boxy, tough look, much like the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. It's such a cool little four-wheel drive. And ironically, you can convert your Jimny into a mini G-Wagon thanks to conversion kits from tuners like Liberty Walk. I mean, how good does that look? Anyway, in standard guise, the Jimny gets LED headlamps along with daytime running lights, chunky electrically folding mirrors, fender flares, these 15-inch alloy wheels, and LED tail lamps on the back. This one also has a bunch of optional accessories like I mentioned, the painted front grille and garnish at the bottom of the front bumper, black side mouldings on the doors, and side garnishes below the doors on either side. Then there's getting into the Jimny, which requires you to pull the key out, which is so utilitarian that manufacturing markings you'd expect to find on the back are actually on the front. You can either use the buttons on the key fob or pop the key into the keyhole on the doors, which is hidden under these magnetic covers, which are probably going to get nicked, to unlock or lock the doors. And on the key, you'll also need that to start the Jimny because you don't get a start-stop button either. Opening the doors, you get a wide opening to get in and out of the front seats, along with chrome scuff guards, although the same can't be said for the back. The passenger seat folds and slides forward with the pull of the seat back lever, but the driver's seat doesn't. There's also a foot pedal on the front passenger seat for rear passengers to get out. Once the seats are folded and slid forward though, it's not too hard to get in and out. That is, if you don't have a bad back. Then we have the interior of the Jimny, which is just as fun and rugged as the outside of this little four-wheel drive. It's a touch of retro mixed in with a touch of modern. I love it. And materials-wise, aside from the leather-wrapped steering wheel, everything is plastic or cloth in here with hex head nut fasteners across the dash and doors. It's as utilitarian as it gets. Speaking of cloth, the seats are surprisingly comfortable and there's plenty of headroom and legroom for my 5'9" self. The seat's also very adjustable. By very, I mean you can recline the backrest or slide the seat forward. That's it. The Jimny's also quite narrow, so you'll definitely feel closer to your passenger up here compared to even a smaller hatchback, but it's certainly not claustrophobic. Tech-wise, you'll need to get the GLX if you want this 7-inch touchscreen with wide Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The 5-door XL gets an even bigger 9-inch screen. The system includes basic functions like radio and Bluetooth, but no navigation or a volume knob for that matter. In reverse, the Jimny also gets a backup camera, and the stereo is as little as the Jimny with just 2 speakers, but with the option to upgrade to a premium system if that's your thing. There's also a little helper screen between the analog gauges in the instrument cluster with basic trip information. Surprisingly, the Jimny gets a few driver assistance and safety systems. There's 6 airbags, basic cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, lane departure warning, weaving alert if you're weaving in your lane, electronic stability control, traction control, and high beam assist. What's also surprising is that the Jimny gets single zone climate control, which is operated through these chunky buttons and dials with a helper screen in the middle. Then there's all the gizmos that make this little four-wheel drive so capable off-road, starting with the all-grip part-time four-wheel drive system, which allows you to choose from two-wheel drive, 2 high for normal driving, and four-wheel drive, 4 high and 4 low for off-roading. The Jimny also gets hill hold and hill descent control, as well as headlight washers to keep those clean when you're smashing through mud. Storage in here is also decent considering how little the Jimny is. There's a small glove box on the dash and a little more space above this, more storage in front of the conventional gear lever with overdrive, where you'll also find a 12-volt power outlet and USB-A port. There's no armrest between the front seats either. Instead, you'll find a small storage space and a pair of cup holders. The Jimny also gets storage bins in the doors, but they're not big enough for bottles. This Jimny also has aftermarket cup holders on either side that bolt onto the dashboard, which is handy, although they're in front of the vent, so you'll want to make sure your drink is either hot or cold based on whether you're running the heating or cooling. That is, unless you prefer your coffee cold or soft drinks warm. Squeezing myself into the back seat of the Jimny, you get 2 seats for a total of 4 seats. And aside from the cup holders in the center console that you need to share with the folks up front, that's really all you get back here. It's no frills. You know what else you don't get back here? Space. It's tight with the driver's seat set to my driving position. There's barely any knee room, although headroom is plenty. And you'll definitely rub shoulders with the person next to you back here because the seats sit between the wheel wells. The seats do get ISOFIX points on the seat base and top tether mounts, which are located in the cargo area that can only be used if you remove the cargo box. So unless you're popping small kids in the back, you wouldn't want to be hauling adults around in these seats. Really, this is a 2+2, a 2-seater with 2 seats in the back for when you really need them. Cargo space wise, the Jimny gets a measly 85 litres with the rear seats up. That's enough space for a few grocery bags, so not a whole lot. But you do get a removable cargo box that sits in the floor for added storage. But drop the 50-50 split rear seats and space increases to 377 litres. Good enough for what is really a 2-seater, and compared to other 2-seaters like the new Nissan Z, which gets 241 litres, the Jimny kicks butt. You do get a 12-volt power outlet back here, and you can option cargo tie downs on either side, which this one doesn't have. Time to jump into the driver's seat and see how this little 4-wheel drive gets down the road. So, driving the Suzuki Jimny. Now I gotta say, I love this car. It has this way of just putting a smile on your face every time you get behind the wheel of it. It's kind of like taking your puppy out for a walk. Every walk is adventurous. Every one of it is full of joy, and there's always going to be some story to tell. The other thing is, you feel like G.I. Joe driving this thing. I mean, it's so utilitarian. It feels so mechanical, so military-esque. I mean, you can hear the drive shaft and the transfer case and the differential just whirring under you. It's almost like driving a Land Cruiser or even a G-Wagon that's a far more capable 4-wheel drive. But the Suzuki somehow replicates that. And I think Suzuki's done really well to bring forward the DNA of the original Jimny and convert that into something that's a bit more modern and a bit more palatable for today's society. And this thing is brilliant. Now, in terms of driving, I mentioned that the Jimny has a 75 kilowatt, 1.5 litre 4-cylinder under the hood. And if you compare that to a base model Toyota Corolla that has 126 kilowatts, this really doesn't have a hell of a lot of power. It's certainly not quick, and to be honest with you, it's not really even zippy. I'd describe it as having ample power. And it's fine, it gets you down the road, it's perfectly suited for suburban or city driving, and it'll do fine on highways or freeways as well, thanks to the 4-speed automatic with overdrive. Steering though, isn't all that great. There's a lot of vagueness off-center. It does have a fantastic turning circle, and from an off-roading perspective, the steering works really well. Then we have suspension in this thing, which is a little bit more on the bouncy side. It does handle bumps, undulations, potholes, whatever you throw at it, fine, it'll get over those things, but you do feel it. It's not uncomfortable, but it's not comfortable either. But then again, it's a Jimny. It's not meant to be comfortable, it's utilitarian, and that's the purpose of this car. So suspension works quite well for what it is. So overall, you get a pretty plasticky interior, you get an engine with a measly 75 kilowatts of power, you get steering that's not all that great for everyday driving, suspension that's more on the bouncy side. In terms of creature comforts, you don't really get too many of those either for the price that you pay for one of these things. And even though the Jimny is capable off-road, let's face it, the reality is that most people that buy a Jimny, they're not going to be taking this thing off-road. And with a price tag of around $45,000 brand new based on demand at the moment, or a second-hand price of around 39,000 Australian dollars drive away, which is the price of this particular car, there's no rational reason why anyone would buy a Jimny. Then it's got nothing to do with being rational. The Jimny is all about the driving experience. This thing has so much heart, it just makes you smile every time you get behind the wheel of it. And most importantly, life's just too short not to have fun. Good boy.